Holiday. And joining us now, Mr. Grover Norquist. He's the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, it is an honor and a pleasure, sir, to have you on the program. Just want to tell you that I'm a follower and a big fan, and I can't say that I've ever disagreed with anything you've ever stated with respect to tax policy, which is something that we bore our users with. I should say our audience with, excuse me. I'm in the IT business. I'm still thinking users. Our audience with quite a bit. But, man, Joe Biden and his tax plans are kind of scary.
They are, indeed. He did tell us during the campaign that he intended to eliminate the entire Trump Republican tax cuts, which is, it's a rather significant tax hike, and would take our corporate rate, the business rate, from 21%, which is sort of competitive with the rest of the world, up to 35%, and then add another 6% for state and local income taxes, so about 40% tax rate. Communist China is 25. That's where we were when he was vice president. He wanted to go back to that. Now he says, well, he really only wants to go to 28, but that is would still put us significantly, that plus the 6% state local, about 33%. Communist China's 25, Europe's 23.5. He would make America uncompetitive on all investment against China and compared to Europe. That's his plan.
It just feels like, though, Grover, that what's the use? You're talking about raising the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28. Doing the quick math on that, that's what, 50, 60, $70 billion a year. I'm not saying that's an insignificant amount of money, but in the scheme of things, when you're proposing a $6 trillion budget, that's an insignificant amount of money.
Well, they'll actually raise more than that, because remember, when we took the rates down, we eliminated a lot of deductions and credits.
Yeah.
So to take it back to where it was is about twice as much money as it was to take it down. So his tax increase is fairly substantial because we took the rates down and eliminated a lot of deductions and credits in doing so. He wants to raise individual taxes. He wants to have a second death tax, taking away the step up in basis when you inherit a farm or a business or a house, so that the two bites at the apple when you're paying two death taxes. And he wants to make the death tax we have now higher. The Democrats talk a lot about Sweden as a socialist country. Sweden has no death tax.
Right. And there's a perception, is there not, that, well, this will only affect those rich people. That's ending the stepped-up basis provision and decreasing the exemption on inheritance.
Well, here's the good news. People understand that taxing businesses, a lot more than I would have thought, understand that taxing businesses is taxing them. We did a poll of 4,500 people with Harris X, and people understand that raising business taxes will make the cost of everything they buy go up, will reduce wages and jobs, will make us uncompetitive with the rest of the world, and that they end up paying the actual burden. Economists will tell you that half to 70% of all corporate taxes, all business taxes, are actually paid by workers in lower wages. That's the way it ends up going, because companies don't have any money they don't get from consumers. What are you taking it from? So the fact that people understand that, and also they don't believe that we should be raising taxes at the end of a pandemic, for crying out loud. So the tax increases that Biden's talking about people realize will hit them. And one of the ways that will happen is that when the corporate income tax is put on a public utility, your electric bill goes up dollar for dollar, because all federal taxes get paid that go directly through to your monthly electric bill or water bill or natural gas bill. And you will pay for that part of the corporate income tax that hits your utility directly. You'll even get a little letter from your utility company telling you that's what happened. One of the reasons we know this is that everybody got that letter when the Republicans cut the corporate income tax. 90% of Americans saw their utility bills go down.
So
everybody
utilities. Yeah, they're regulated in most states, right? Utilities are regulated entities in states, and so they go to the regulatory bodies and say, "Hey, look, we had a tax increase. Our costs are up. We got to raise our rates. We're passing this on."
And they don't even have to go to them. That's an automatic pass-through.
Oh, okay, it's automatic. Didn't even know that. So they don't have
right
to.
Into your takes your pocket money away, right into your pocket, takes your money, and so the president is lying or misstating or doesn't understand economics when he suggests that you're not going to pay the bulk of the corporate income taxes. Average middle-class Americans will pay that directly. We saw this when the Republicans cut taxes, the corporate income tax from 35 to 21, from highest in the world to okay competitive. You saw in 2019, the second year of the tax cut, that the median income of a family, if you lined everybody up, the family making exactly the middle, about $60,000 or so, saw a $4,400 pay increase. $4,400, 6.8% increase in their compensation. That's huge, 1 year. And that's not one time. That's what they get paid. That's the raise they got. It goes into the future. Why? Because corporations cut taxes, had their taxes cut. They could invest more capital per worker. Americans are more productive than other countries. Why? Because we have more capital per worker, more investment per worker. We're not more productive than Bangladesh because we're smarter or nicer or something, but because we have better technology and more capital per worker than somebody in other countries, and that makes all the difference. That's why we are worth more and get paid more, and lowering the corporate income tax makes that possible.
It just feels like listening to the president's rhetoric. I just remember so vividly him saying over and over again, it's time that we reward work and not wealth, which kind of insinuates that folks who achieve wealth never worked, in my view. But the purpose, it almost seems punitive. Like, well, we're going to raise individual and corporate taxes, and I guess there are some projections that say this will produce X dollars more of revenue, but it's not even remotely close, even if that were to occur, to cover the massive spending increases projected. So what's the purpose? Is it just punitive in nature, or are we entering a period of MMT?
There are two reasons for it. The first is punitive. When Obama was told, Obama said he wanted to raise the capital gains tax from 20 to 23.8, and he was told in a question, in the past when the capital gains tax has gone up, you get less money, not more, because people don't sell stuff and pay capital gains. And when you cut the capital gains tax, the government actually makes more money. Why are you raising the capital gains tax? And the President Obama said he was still for raising the capital gains tax, which he thinks is a tax on rich people instead of a tax on getting rich. That he's still for doing that, even if, because he knows that it will lose revenue, and he's still for it. So it wasn't even to raise money, it was to punish. Not to raise money, but to punish. So you're quite right, the punishment is the point. It's not the bug, it's the feature. But there's a second point. They need to scream out loud, we're taxing the rich, we're taxing the rich, we're taxing the rich. Because with all the spending they're doing, there's no way they're going to pay for it just taxing rich people. So they will say tax the rich so often it's ringing in your ears that when they come in with a value-added tax or various wage taxes like they're raising the Social Security taxes and so on, and hits the middle class. That's the difference between Europe and the United States, is they tax their middle class with wage taxes and value-added taxes, which is at about 20%. Just everything you buy, there's a 20% sales tax on it for the federal government. Value-added tax, 25% in Sweden. So in order to prepare people for, now that we've really taxed those rich people silly, we're going to have to ask you for just a little bit. And of course, a little bit is most. But that's why they do it. They say tax the rich, and with the other hand, they tax middle-income people.
It's just unbelievable. And we got a break coming up, but I understand you can hang with us through the break and stay with us for another segment, Grover? That sounds great, because when we come back, I want to talk about capital gains taxes and also the progressive nature of our tax system, more so than any other country on the planet. We'll be right back after this break. We've got Grover Norquist. He's the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, is our guest. So, Mr. Norquist, the capital gains plans that the president has, which would essentially, on many Americans, tax gains on investment, passive income at ordinary income rates. This just isn't good. I think there's a perception that it's only going to affect those rich people, those folks he is proposing to do this on those with incomes over $1 million. But this affects everybody.
It certainly does. Capital gains taxes are taxes on getting rich. It's not a tax on being rich. Capital gains taxes in the United States are 23.8%. In China, it's 20%. Our capital gains tax is higher than theirs. He wants to go up to 40, twice the capital gains tax in China. And he doesn't understand the damage this will do. He's replaying not Obama's mistakes, he's replaying Jimmy Carter's mistakes. Not only Jimmy Carter's mistakes, the mistakes that the Democratic Congress made Jimmy Carter back off of. Jimmy Carter had a capital gains tax of 49%. They took it down to 28%. The Democrat Congress told Jimmy Carter, "You're crazy." And our friend Biden wants to go back to Jimmy Carter levels of taxes on businesses, Jimmy Carter levels on taxes on capital gains, Jimmy Carter inflation. Oh, and by the way, when he says, only people who make a certain amount are going to pay this tax. When you live in Argentina, everybody's a multimillionaire because they've inflated the currency so much. So you very quickly find out that you're going to get whacked because you have this higher income, even if it's just inflated money. The good news around the country is that Mississippi and other states are looking to phase out their state income taxes. So while Obama and the Democrats have a narrow majority, he won narrowly the presidency, they have a 5-vote lead in the House. Roughly, it goes back and forth as people die and get elected. And a 50-50 vote tie goes to Kamala Harris, so that by one vote they can run the Senate. Very, very close. But in the states, in the red states, we have a Republican governor and Republican legislature. Arizona just it voted to phase down its income tax down to a 2.5% flat tax, and then they want to go to 0. West Virginia, the House has voted there to phase out the income tax. Governor's for it. Senate hasn't moved it yet. The House both the governor and the Speaker of the House in Mississippi want to phase out the income tax to 0. And you're also looking at North Dakota, where the House has voted to phase out their income tax to 0. And New Hampshire, which has no income taxes on wages, but does tax investment income and dividend income. And that tax is going to be phased out over the next 4 years. So there's a lot of move. They're following the model largely done in North Carolina, which is also working to phase out its income tax. They just passed a bill through the Senate, which would phase their corporate income tax out to 0. They've been cutting it 2/3 in the last 7 years. The personal income tax is down by 1/3 in the last 7 years. They want to phase that out to 0. They say when revenue comes into a certain amount, anything above that goes to paying down the income tax. And so there are different ways to do a revenue trigger, but that makes sure that if there's a recession, you don't cut taxes 2 points a year or something. You cut taxes as revenue comes in, you permanently reduce it. And in North Carolina, they keep cutting the tax rates and they keep making more money because more people move to it, more people invest there, and people have more income.
Yeah, and so briefly, also a shout out from someone I think you know, Clark Wise.
Yes.
That I think worked with C&P Action Inc. Just wanted to pass that on to you. So
say hi back.
It seems like we've talked about this on the show, that we've got states that are really dividing around this issue of taxation. You just described a number of states that are working to eliminate or reduce their income taxes, Mississippi being one of them. We've got other states such as Washington State, California, New York. They're increasing their income taxes. It's not a matter of, well, these states are reducing it to be more competitive, I guess, or to be more conservative, and these others are leaving it alone. They're actually increasing it.
Yeah, the blue states are doubling down on stupid. Now, as long as you have a federal government throwing money at you, you can afford to do that. The real disaster was in losing those 2 Senate seats in Georgia. Had we not lost those seats, we would have held. The Democrats couldn't raise taxes and they couldn't raise spending.
Yeah,
and they'd have just sat there, and all those blue states would go bankrupt. Now they got bailed out. They've been given another lease on life, and instead of using it to save themselves, they're acting like this is going to go on forever. As soon as you have a Republican House and or a Senate, the bleeding stops. They're not going to keep kicking out those kind of dollars anymore. And with a different presidency, what we need is competition between the states to provide the best government at the lowest cost. We see that people choose to move to states with low income taxes or no income taxes. They leave the high spending states. New York, it's roughly the same size as Florida in population. Florida's a little bit bigger. Florida has a $100 billion state budget. New York, $200 billion. So per capita, they spend twice as much money in New York as Florida. They got twice as much what? Education? No. Roads? No. What do they get for their money? A whole bunch of nice pensions for some of the government workers.
Incredibly inefficient use of capital is what it is, to just transfer it to government and let them decide how to spend it. What do you think about our plans here in Mississippi? You just touched on it. Our governor and certainly our Speaker of the House is really the major force at this point behind elimination of the income tax here in Mississippi.
Yeah, Governor Tate Reeves and House Speaker Philip Gunn are both strong supporters of getting to zero. There are several ways of getting there. I tend to prefer the North Carolina method because it's been working for 7 years, and that you set up a trigger and then the rates come down. House Speaker Phil Gunn did something like that. He puts in a spending cap. So you can set up a spending cap, and any revenue that comes in above the spending cap goes to paying down income taxes. That's something that can work as well. And a spending cap, basically, the spending cap and revenue that comes in above that goes to pay down the income tax, does two things. Keep spending from going crazy, which then later they'll want taxes for, and it constantly reduces your income tax. If you're talking to businesses and people move to Mississippi, and you can say, we're on a path to zero, people who move or build a factory in your state, they don't care what taxes are now. They want to know what they're going to be in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years. And if you're committed to phasing out the income tax, you're as good as a no income tax state when it comes to a target for people to move money and jobs here.
Yeah, and from an investment and deployment of capital and perspective, when you're putting these projects together, you're looking at that over a long-term basis. You're looking at the IRR, and taxes are figured into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I left out too. Wisconsin just had a big tax cut, Republican legislature. Looks like the Democrat governor is going to sign that because the whole budget's wrapped around it. And in Ohio, the governor is signing the largest tax cut in Ohio's history. And they did so using some of the money that the federal government threw at them. Remember, the federal government said, you can't do that? Well, they went to court and they just got a decision in Ohio, that area said absolutely can. That reasoning was so overwhelming that's now true for all 50 states. So watch for other states to go back and use some of that money instead of spending it on willy-nilly on things that you don't need and then just be sucking up capital. You can give it back to people in lower taxes. Could be very, very helpful.
We got a couple of minutes left. I wanted to get your thoughts on this recent, agreement in principle by 130 countries to I see you really like that when I see your reaction. This minimum tax rate, it's like we're going to cede our tax sovereignty to these other 130 countries. What is going on with that?
Well, Al Capone and his friends used to agree on what the price of whiskey and beer was going to be, and they didn't like people competing with them. And OPEC wanted to set the price of gasoline or oil, and they didn't want anybody cheating by having less expensive. And the Europeans have very expensive government. We have a fairly expensive government, but not as bad as Europe. I mean, we grow faster than Europe. We're richer than Europe, but we're leaner and tighter than they are, as odd as that sounds, given where we are right now. But they've been growing slowly for dozens of years. And as a result, they want to get the United States to raise their taxes. They want to have a minimum tax. We should be going to zero corporate income tax because it comes out of the pockets of workers, and we ought to be clear who we're taxing. Corporate income tax just hide who's getting screwed. by the government.
Ridiculous.
And that's on purpose. They like to pretend it's General Motors. Who's he? Well, he doesn't exist. But of course not. The workers do. Consumers do. They want to put a floor under corporate income taxes across the world. China, of course, has already kind of announced they really have no intention of paying.
Oh, they're licking their chops.
They hide their subsidies. The British say they're not going to do it for their banks, which is their one big industry. Yeah. But you know what the Americans do? We sign on to those stupid things, and then we feel we have to keep them because we promised. And watch in the same way that we took the Paris Accord on closing down the economy, not for COVID, but for global warming. The other reason to close the economy, I guess.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We got to go, Grover.
Everybody else is ignoring it. The Chinese are building coal-fired plants.
Appreciate you coming on. It's all for them and none for America. Thanks so much, Grover. Talk to you soon.